Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I had an interesting discussion with one of my sons very recently about justice. And we were talking about what is justice? How do we understand it? Why do we put people in prison? How does that speak to our sense of justice? What is it, the image of the scales, and that we want even scales, and somehow by putting someone in prison, we're getting even scales. How are we tying all of that together to understand how our society views justice? What are we supposed to think about all of that? And part of our discussion went to prison and the idea of what happens when someone goes to prison. So we're saying they're giving time. That's what they're putting back. That's what they're giving into the justice system, into society, is time. We're taking it from them. We're taking time. And because we are mortal beings, that is our most precious quantity, is time. How much time do we have? So to turn to someone and say, well, now I'm going to take years. So I'm going to keep you here where your life stagnates, and I'm going to take years from you. And that somehow is justice in our thinking, that time has been put into the system. But then we know that we've encountered periods where we look at prisons and we say, no, they're having too much fun in there. Something's not right here. They can't have parties. What are they having parties? This is not what we thought. So it's not just time, but now there's an element of fun. You shouldn't have fun. And if you're not having fun, it's not just, I want you to not have fun, but are we actually saying we want people to suffer? That we want them to be in prison and we want a hard life in there. So it's not just about time now it's about suffering. And actually, are we even saying that we want the element of suffering to be commensurate with the suffering they inflicted? So if they were guilty of a crime where there really wasn't a victim, maybe it was a crime on paper, then we could say, well, we don't need too much suffering there. We're fine with time. But if, in fact, there was suffering involved in the crime, there was a victim, then we don't want the parties, and we want some kind of balance of suffering. And we never look at it and say, that's what we're saying we want. That's what, as a society, we want to see happen. It's as if we hand it over to the institutions, we hand it over to the government, we say, you deal with it. You know what our morals are, you know where everything is, you deal with it. I don't want to actually have to deal with it. So we stop thinking about it. We stop asking ourselves, what did we craft? What is it that to us speaks of justice? And then we look in the Torah and we say, the Torah says it's actually not that simple. And the reason that my son and I were talking about it, and the reason we were trying to parse all this out, is because it comes into this week's Torah reading. When we look at it and we realize that, in fact, the word for justice is the word tzedek. And Joseph is the only one in our text that gets the title Yosef HaTzadik. He is Joseph the Tzaddik, the righteous one. And we look at it and we realize that's the same word. The word for tzaddik and the word for tzedek, it's the same word. It's coming off the same root. So what are we being told about Joseph? And why is he the only one who gets that? We have Avram Avinu, our ancestor. We have Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe is the one who is our master teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu. We're not getting the title of a tzaddik. None of them are getting that title, as a matter of fact. Yosef's getting it. And so we sit there and we think, well, how did that happen? What do we see in the Joseph story that suddenly we're saying, now there's a tzaddik? And it's almost baffling to us of how did we get there and what is the connection between that and justice? How do we tie all these things together? So we have to ask ourselves, so what does it mean to be a tzaddik? How can I get a definition and then ask myself, does Joseph fit that definition? So the first part of what does it mean, we're going to go to Noah, because Noah is the first person where the text tells us he was tzaddik b'dorotav. He was a righteous man, a tzaddik in his generation. And we all look at it and all the commentaries agree, So it's actually context. It's not absolute. Noah's not a tzaddik everywhere. Noah's a tzaddik in his generation. And his generation is the generation God said, I'm wiping y'all out because it's completely terrible. So in that generation, we would say, okay, now we have a man who's a tzaddik. It's a relative term. It's not an absolute. So we look at it and we say, so in other words, someone is a tzaddik depending on what's going on around them. And that's why, although we've heard Judaism doesn't have saints, this is why we don't have saints, because sainthood is an absolute. In order to be a saint, you have to meet the qualifications, and it doesn't matter where you live, when you live, how you live, what's going on around you. It doesn't matter. It's going to be the same qualifications. Sainthood is an absolute. Being a tzaddik is relative. It depends what's going on around you. So we can never have a saint because we don't have a category for it. So we look at Noah and we've got that piece of information. And now we come back to Joseph and we say, okay, it's context. Maybe Joseph is a tzaddik in the context of everyone around him, like with Noah, except the context is his brothers. So now we're going to say, that's the context that makes someone a tzaddik? Then I can say pretty much assuredly, everyone in this room is a tzaddik, because I can't imagine anyone in this room has kidnapped someone and sold them into slavery. So if that's our bar, if we're going to say it depends on what's going on around us, well, that's such a minimal bar if we're looking at his brothers. And now I'm not impressed with Joseph. That's a tzaddik? I don't think so. I don't think that's going to give me the title I need for Joseph. So we understand that context isn't going to help us understand why Joseph. So we'll move to behavior. Maybe it's something he did, and all of the commentaries actually do move to behavior, and they say, look, he resisted Potiphar's wife. There's a tzaddik. He resisted the temptations of a married woman. He resisted the temptation of a forbidden sexual liaison. And again, we're going to sit there and say, well, I mean, many people don't resist, but a lot of people do resist. And I don't know that that makes them a tzaddik. You're simply doing what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to be cohabiting with other people's spouses. That's just something we're supposed to do. That doesn't make you a tzaddik. So again, we're looking and saying, all right, then it's not behavior. I still can't crack it. Why Joseph? Why is he getting that title? So we have to dig deeper. And we're going to go back to the root of the word that says justice, and that's where we're going to unlock it. Because when we talk about justice in the Torah, the one verse that always stands out to us is tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. Justice, justice, you will chase. And we're always looking at that. The commentaries are saying, so I'm going to chase it but never get it. So I'm still supposed to chase it. And why is it saying it twice? Why is it saying tzedek, tzedek? Let me chase it once. Why repeat, especially in the Torah when we know there's no repetition for no reason? So why is it telling it to me twice? And many of the commentaries say because the key to understanding justice is to understand that when there is a dispute, there are two sides. And both sides truly believe they are right. Both sides truly believe justice is on their side. Now you have this side with tzedek and this side with tzedek. Now chase it. If it were clear, if I could look at it and say, you are clearly in the right, you are clearly in the wrong, I can still tell you the one who is clearly in the wrong thinks they're in the right. Their intent and their perspective and their understanding from their point of view, it's justified. They believe what they're saying. They truly believe it. So now the question of how am I going to figure this one out? Where is justice to be had if both sides are equally just in their hearts? What do we do? And we understand from the Talmud, it tells us that's why you're chasing, and what you're chasing is the space in between. You're not chasing this view and that view of justice. You're chasing the space in between, because the space in between is the compromise. The idea that there is justice on this side and there is justice on this side, so I got to give it up. I'm never going to figure it out. I have to find a way to move forward. And to move forward is to sit in the middle and find the compromise. A little bit of the justice from this side and a little bit of the justice from that side. That's the compromise. But what ends up happening is that in chasing it, our goal is to have peace prevail. That's the goal. The dispute has to come to an end. Peace has to prevail. How do I do that? I explore in the middle. And everybody understands we're going to be exploring in the middle. But when we explore in the middle, we're going to actually satisfy no one. So when you compromise, you're likely to walk away feeling like, oh, well then, fine. What was that? I didn't get what I know to be true. They didn't get what they know to be true. We begrudge the compromise. Compromises are difficult for us, except for the tzaddik. And that's where we see that little space where Joseph actually fits in beautifully. Because the tzaddik, the person where the title has within it the word justice, understands that you'll never find absolute justice, so stop looking for it. What we have to look for is the value of the compromise, because it will lead us to peace. And the goal was peace. Justice is the tool, not the goal. The tzaddik intrinsically understands that, and therefore doesn't begrudge the compromise. Actually wants it, seeks it, chases it, pursues it. We look at Joseph and we ask ourselves, with everything we know about his life, where is the justice for him? He was abused horribly. He was kidnapped, stripped by his brothers, thrown into a pit we were told is filled with scorpions and snakes, and left there to die. And only by chance they thought, you know what? Why kill him? Let's sell him. It's horrible, start to finish. He ends up in slavery. Where's the justice? Because the Torah never balances it out. We never see that there is justice for him. He ends up saying to his brothers, don't worry, it all ended up for the good. God made it for the good. So don't worry, it's all fine. And from his point of view, all right, I guess you need to do that for your brothers to move forward. But from our point of view, what was that? Good outcomes do not justify bad actions. You can't say because it happened to end up well, oh, fine, so you could do that horrible thing, but don't worry, it ended up well. It's an absurdity of justice if we end up with that philosophy, because it's the equivalent of saying that the modern state of Israel, to some degree, is the result of the Second World War. So the Second World War is okay. We can't say it. We can't view it. We can't accept it. It's an argument that goes nowhere. So we dismiss Joseph saying it. And we look again and we look at, all right, how am I now understanding it? And in fact, the Talmud tells us about this idea of a good outcome, but a bad act. And the Talmud says, no, we can't get there. And the example they use is the example of a contract. If I contract a marriage, and in the contract of the marriage it says that my husband is poor, and I sign it and I say, okay, listen, we'll tie our fortunes together. And suddenly it comes out that he's not poor, he's wealthy. Could you make the argument, so you're better off? Yeah, the contract lied to you, but you're better off. It's a good outcome. And the Talmud says, no, the contract's null and void. Good outcomes do not justify bad actions. Plain and simple. There's really not much to argue about that. Joseph forgives his brothers. And he actually says, God made it good. That's fine on his part, not fine on our part. So we're still looking for that justice thing. Where is his justice? And then we look at it and we say, he's actually not pursuing justice. He had every opportunity, and he's not. I want to understand why not. Two reasons. First reason is, it'll kill his father. If he ends up looking for justice, he's going to have to tell his father exactly what those brothers did to him. Those brothers are his father's sons. It's going to kill Jacob. So he's looking at that, weighing that, and asking, is justice important enough to him that he's willing to actually kill his father over it? Does justice prevail the preservation of a human life? And Joseph is saying, no, it doesn't. Also because, to be perfectly honest, the text has told us it's obvious. Jacob's figured it out already. He knows. The parent knows. The parent knows. We know that when we have our kids, we're going to start two funds for them. One is the education fund, and the other is the therapy fund, because they're going to need them both for what we're going to do to them as we're raising them. Parents make mistakes. Parents try. We have great intentions. It's never going to be perfect. We know that. It's not like it's a big revelation to parents that something happened with the kids. So where's the justice in killing Jacob over it? But secondly, and more importantly, is that Joseph is listening to what's going on through the eyes of Jacob. And by Jacob saying, here's the description of our family. And he describes to Joseph that the father has been mourning for decades over a lost son. And he describes the family in shambles. And then he says, there's only one brother left that our father cares about, and it's Benjamin, and you're threatening Benjamin. And Judah describes it to Joseph without malice, without anger, without jealousy, without anything that triggered them about Joseph. He's describing the same thing about Benjamin, but he's simply saying, this is the reality of our family, and so we protect our father. Joseph hears that and realizes justice has already been done. The scales are balanced. These people have changed. They've paid for decades for what they did. They confronted what they did. They rehabilitated. They changed themselves. That is justice. It's already done. So he doesn't need to pursue it. And we look at it, and that's when we say, that's it. Is for not pursuing it, for not bringing it to his father and having his day. He recognizes, and this is what we learn from him about the definition of a tzaddik, that there is justice in the world. And sometimes we actually are our own harshest accusers. That we are the ones who make ourselves pay ultimate prices for things because we can't forgive ourselves. And so we're demanding justice of ourselves over and over and over again, even though it's been achieved. When we bring true, measured justice to ourselves, we change who we are. And a tzaddik will see that change and will appreciate that change and will let it go because the world has been balanced again. Ultimately, that is what brings us to forgive each other for our human failings, our human moments, the pain we bear, the things we carry, the times we feel, but where's the justice? And that question blinds us to the fact that it may already be there, that people will hold themselves accountable. And Joseph, the one in the Torah who most deserves justice for what happened to him, is the tzaddik, because he sees it and then teaches it to